Hello friends, today's video is all about making the Pattern Fantastique Vali dress out of a wide back quilting fabric. So I made the dress last week, it was for my daughter and it turned out great. But before I publish this video, I just want to make a couple of clarifying points. One is that not all wide back fabrics are created equal. So I am using or have used this. It's a Moda fabric, it's by Create Joy Project. And Moda's wide back fabrics these days are considered a cotton sateen. So they're quite light, quite floaty, have a soft sort of silky texture, a little bit of structure, maybe like a poplin, maybe not quite that structured. But they're beautiful for dresses. They hold a little bit of shape and volume, but they're not heavy or stiff. This fabric is in my shop. It also comes in blue, and I'm going to make myself a dress out of this one. If you have any suggestions of which dress I should make, I am open to them. Now, this is a dress I've made before out of a quilting wide back. This is a Ruby Star Society wide back, which is also considered a cotton sateen. It's perhaps even softer than the Moda that I've just used. This is the Stylarc Belle dress, and it's one of my favorites. It turned out beautifully. I'll pop a picture in of me wearing it. And I definitely would recommend using a Ruby Star Society wide back fabric for any dress that you want to make. I think it turns out beautifully. And I think the only other dress I've made so far out of a wide back is this one. This is the Stylarc Hope dress, and I made it out of an Alison Glass wide back. Alison Glass is manufactured by Andover, and this fabric is not a cotton sateen. It's a little bit heavier, a little bit more matte, not as silky, not quite as drapey, but still certainly fine enough to wear as a dress. It holds a little more structure, I think, than the cotton sateen, but I would not call it heavyweight or thick. But in saying that, there are many wide backs on the market that are quite heavy and quite thick. And overall, I would say a lesser quality of fabric than regular quilting cotton, and certainly lesser than these cotton sateens that Moda and Ruby Star Society are putting out. Maybe not even lesser quality, just less suitable for making dresses out of, I would say. So yeah, if you are ordering online and you intend to use your wide back fabrics for garments, I would ask the shop owner to just clarify for you exactly the feel of that fabric and if it would be suitable for garments before going ahead, or if possible, always it's nice if you can go in and touch it in person and see how you feel. Okay, so that is my stance on wide back fabrics for garments. And the other thing I would just mention is that I've made the Pattern Fantastique Vali dress a number of times, and I almost don't even look at the instructions anymore when I make it. I've sort of developed my own process over the years of making it several times. So what I'm about to show you is not necessarily what it tells you to do in the pattern. It's not necessarily in the order that it will tell you to do it in the pattern. It is just my way of doing it that I've sort of developed. Some things may be exactly the same as the pattern and some things may not be. It's chatty and it's long, but if you've watched any of my other Sew With Me videos, you know that that's kind of how I roll with that. I'm just hanging out with you in the sewing room as I work through the process, and if that sounds interesting or helpful to you, then I hope you enjoy this video. And if not, that's okay. Try again next time. Okay, with that, I'll let you watch the video. Love you. Hello friends. Making garments for other people is not usually what I do around here, but I've just finished my Hope dress commission, and my next job is to make a dress for my daughter. So I've given the sewing room a quick reset, and my first task here is to find out how much fabric I'm going to need and then pre-wash it. So the fabric requirements on the pattern say that you need about 3.15 meters of fabric that is 140 centimeters wide if you're making the size that I'm making, which is a size 20. But what I have is a quilting Wideback fabric, which is 108 inches wide, or about 2¾ meters. So 274 centimeters wide. So that's double the width of the fabric requirements in the pattern. So I need to pre-wash this fabric, obviously, but I can't pre-wash the whole bolt. There's like 12 meters on here. So I need to figure out how much of this I'm going to need before I can cut off a decent amount with a little bit of extra to put in the washing machine. So I'm just going to show you how I do that. So I'm lucky that I have this lovely big cutting table, and I'm going to roll it out sort of as far as I can without the bolt falling on the floor. And so this fabric, the width of it here is folded over. There's a fold here, but it's actually folded over twice. So instead of having 2 layers of fabric like there normally is when you lay it out, there's 4. So I just need to lay my pattern pieces out, which I have all here traced. Lay my pattern pieces all out on this fabric, but I can kind of double them up, right? Because I know I've got 4 layers here instead of just 2. So I'll do that, and then I'll just come back and show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so I've got my fabric laid out here, and I've got my pieces just roughly laid out to guess how much I'm going to need. So these are my skirt pieces. And what I essentially have here, this fabric is doubled over twice. So I essentially have 2 full widths of fabric laid out on the fold. So I know that both of my skirt pieces will fit on this width of fabric. So I've got both my skirt pieces laid on top of me here. And here I've got my back bodice piece. Now, the Vali dress has a bodice and a neck facing. But when I make it, I like to completely line the bodice. So I'm going to need 2 of these. I'll need 2 of the back piece and 2 of the bodice piece, the front bodice pieces as well. But I'm quite sure that with the fabric that's left over in this part of the fabric, after I cut out the bodice, I'm going to be able to fit those on there. These are my ties. I've just got a long skinny strip of tie. And then here are my sleeves. So my sleeve pieces for the Vali dress are almost 1 meter long. They're very long, but this fabric is 2.75 meters wide. So I know that I can lay both of these out across the width of fabric, and I'm going to have about 75 centimeters left over, which means I should be able to fit this piece, which is the bodice front, in the leftover space after cutting out the sleeves. But I need 4 of these because I'm going to fully line the bodice instead of facing it. So I need 4 of these, and there might not be enough to squeeze them in. So I am just going to cut a bit of extra length, big enough to fit this yoke piece in. It will probably be way too much fabric, but I'd rather have a little bit too much than not quite enough. Also, it could shrink a little bit when I wash it. So the pattern says that you need 3.15 meters, so 315 centimeters of 140 wide fabric. My fabric is twice that wide, so it would make sense that I would need half as much length. So half of 3 meters 15 is what, about 1.70 meters? Let's see how much I have here. Right here where it meets the bolt, which you can't see. So this is the bolt right here, and I've wound it out to there. Right there is 1.70 meters. So I'm fairly confident that that is going to work. So yeah, I think that's going to work. I'm going to cut it out 1.70 meters. It will give me probably a little bit extra than I need, which is, you know, better than not enough. And yeah, I'll pop that into the washing machine and hopefully be able to get this washed and dried and cut out tomorrow to start working on it, because her birthday is not until February 2nd, but she has an event to go to next Thursday and she would like to wear it. And today is Friday, so that gives me Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 5 days essentially to get it done. I know I can make a Vali dress in 5 days, but the question is, what life will happen in between now and then, because I know that I can make a hope dress in one day and the last one took me 4. So we'll see how we go. Fingers crossed, but I'm excited to get started. And while I have you here, it was not my intention when I put these shelves up to hang clothing on them for all of my YouTube videos, because I don't even think I had a YouTube video when I put these shelves up. But it is handy to have them. So as I am making this Vali dress, I'm happy to have my collection of Vali dresses here to support me. This is the first one that I ever made. This is a linen cotton blend from Spotlight. I love it. This, I think this was actually the second one that I made in 100% linen floral fabric from Fabulous Fabrics. This was my Christmas dress in 2024. This is a Fabric Godmother Le Weekend print, which I purchased from the Dahlia Society. And somewhere in the middle of there, maybe the first one, was this top that I made in a rayon from Spotlight. It gets very, very wrinkly, this rayon, which is not ideal. Yeah, so I've made a few Valis, but it has been a while. I think the last one I made was my Christmas dress in 2024. So it's been over a year since I've made one. There's some tricky bits in the construction that might need a bit of a refresher. But yeah, I'm excited to get started. And also my air conditioner is still not working, if you're wondering why I'm looking a bit like a drowned rat at the moment. It could be a long week, but we will do our best. Okay, it is the next day now, or maybe even the day after that. Today's Sunday. I don't remember when I started this, but today is Sunday and my fabric is washed and laid out and I'm ready to start pinning and cutting. But I did realize that once again, I have forgotten to introduce myself. So hello, welcome to Brave Little Buckaroo. I'm Tamsin and I live in Perth, Western Australia, where I have an online quilting shop and run a long arm quilting business from my home. And I also like to make my own clothes and knit and do all sorts of other creative things, which I talk about here on this channel. So let's make a Vali dress. I think the hardest part about using a wide back is getting it all laid out so that you can cut it out, because it is so wide, right? So what I have done, this is the length that I've cut and that's the width. And for what it's worth, I normally wash all of my handmade garments in cold water and hang them to dry. But because this is not going to be for me, I want it to be prepared for anything that may happen. I washed it in warm water with a couple of color catchers, which is, I always use color catchers for the first wash. And I did pop it in the dryer for a little while so that just in case my daughter does wash it in warm water and chuck it in the dryer, it should be okay. Like it shouldn't shrink any further, at least. And for what it's worth, it did not run and I don't really see that it's shrunk at all either. Maybe like a couple of centimeters of the 1.7 meters that I cut. So yeah, pretty good for just for reference, it hasn't really shrunk that much at all. And it didn't bleed. Good news. Okay, so what I have done here, if you can see, is this is one of the skirt pieces. And I say skirt, but like the bodice is more just like a yoke, and then the bottom of the dress comes from here. So the skirt is practically the whole dress, really. So this is one of the pieces, and I've just folded the fabric over enough to fit this piece so I can cut it on the fold. And because I know, because I know that the fabric is 108 inches or 275 centimeters wide, I can see how much of it I've used here, and that is 23 inches doubled over because it's folded. So I've used 46 inches or 117 centimeters, which means I have well more than half of the width of this fabric left. So I know that I can cut this out safely, and what's left at the other end of this width will be enough fabric to cut the other skirt piece. So this is the back piece, and I've also got to cut the front piece. And then in between the bits that are left over from the skirt pieces and the sleeves, I'm going to cut the bodices. So yeah, I can go without having to lay the whole thing out and pin everything. I can cut this piece and then with the other end fold it over and then cut the front skirt from that piece. And the other big pieces I have is the sleeves, and they look like this. So the sleeve does create part of the bodice, so it goes sort of like this. That's sort of how that works. And when I measured this yesterday, it was slightly less than 1 meter wide, and so I know that I can put 2 of them along the width of this fabric and it's going to fit. And then the other things I need to do are the bodice pieces, which are fairly small. I'll cut 2 of these because I'm fully facing and 4 of these. And then that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these pieces cut out, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I just want to show you, I just want to show you how I've laid this out. So I have cut how it was before. I cut the one skirt side off one piece, and then I went to the other side and I folded it over and cut the other skirt piece. And now I've got this big sort of triangle shape in the middle of those 2 skirt pieces that I already cut out. So this is the back bodice, which for some reason they have you cut it out as a full piece, but it's the same on both sides. So I'm just going to put it on the fold. I'm going to need 2 of these because I'm lining, and this is the front bodice, and I'll need 4 of those, but they're not cut on the fold. So I can fit this one on the fold and this one for two cuts. And then if I move this one down here, I can fit the other back bodice underneath there. And if I just pan you over so slightly, I can fit the other front bodice in this space to cut 2 more of those. I've also already been able to cut the straps out of the pieces on the other side of the skirt pieces. So I'll be able to get all of my bodice pieces, all of my skirts and all of my straps out of this much. And then I'll need to cut, all I have left after that is my sleeve pieces. So the extra fabric that I cut in case I wouldn't have enough was unnecessary. Also, if you are using the facing pieces that come with the pattern and not fully lining the bodice like I am, yeah, without a question, because the facing pieces are way smaller than the actual bodice pieces. So if you want to use the facings, then you will easily be able to get it out of this much fabric. But even with the fully lined bodice, it will work just fine. Hi, it's future me from a couple of days later, and I realized as I was doing all of my prep work and starting to sew that I had forgotten to cut out my pocket bags for this pattern. So I was able to still get all 4 pocket bags out of the fabric that I had without cutting into that extra 25 odd centimeters that I had cut, 20 centimeters that I had cut. So it is still possible, even with pocket bags, to get it out of 1.5 meters, but it was tight, right? So if you're stressed about it, or if you don't want to be worried, either consider getting 2 meters or consider doing your pocket bags and or your lining and or your facing in a different color, like just a plain solid or something like that. And then you'd have plenty. Like if I couldn't have got these out of it, I cut extra fabric, as you know, in the beginning, so I could have used that either way. But if I couldn't have got the pocket bags out of it, I would have just used like a plain white or something instead. I've done that before as well, like a cotton voile or something like that. Yeah. So now I'll go back to the future. Also, hi, still future me. I don't know if I mentioned the pockets on this dress, as I often find, are laughably small and very, very low. So I, as always, have used my preferred pocket piece, which I stole from another pattern a long time ago, and that is just always what I use. It is nice and big. Yes, so also if you wanted to use the pockets that came with the pattern, they take up less fabric because they're small, but if you want to actually put your hands in them, you'll be out of luck. So yes, that's all I have to say for now about pockets. I have lied again. Still me, and I have more to say about pockets. The actual pockets of this dress, I forgot because I've changed the pattern. The actual pockets on this dress are cut as part of the skirt. So you cut them out, the pockets are attached to the skirt, and then when you sew them together, you sort of do a weird thing where you like sew them together and then flip them around and whatever it is you do. But I didn't like it, and the pockets were too small. So I just cut the skirt pieces straight and then attach my normal pockets. And now that is all I have to say about pockets until I start working on them. Right, I've got all of my pieces cut out, and I had a strip about 25 centimeters left over. So again, yes, could have got it out of 1.5 meters of Wideback fabric. And there's quite a lot of stay stitching in this pattern, so I'll need to stay stitch the necklines, both the front bodices, all 4 pieces, and both the back bodices, 2 pieces. And they also want you to stay stitch down the sides of the bodice, and there's a part of the sleeve piece that also needs to be stay stitched because that constructs part of the bodice. So lots of stay stitching to happen there, and then start the construction. So I've got lots of prepping, and I've got to mark my points and all that sort of thing as well. So I'm going to do that today. And I started late today, and it's starting to get dark now. So that probably will be all I get done this evening, and then I'll come back tomorrow to start sewing. It is late Monday afternoon now. I am wildly behind schedule as always, but I have done some work, and I was going to pop in and show you what I've done so far. So I have why can't I remember that word? Stay stitched the neckline and the side bodice of all 4 front pieces, and both back pieces. Stay stitched the neckline and the side bit. And I've also stay stitched the skirt pieces. I think I said yesterday that it was the sleeves that needed a bit of stay stitching. It's not, it's the skirt. A little bit of the skirt piece makes this underarm part of the sleeve on the front and the back. So those little side bits there, they want you to stay stitch them. The centers will be gathered. I'm really not sure how necessary all of this stay stitching is. I mean, it's a pretty straight cut. It's barely even on the bias, but I'll do as I'm told. So I've stay stitched all of those things. The other thing I've done is, these are the sleeves, and these sort of go like this somehow. They're very wide, and this is the bottom edge. So I have overlocked that just because that gives me something nice and straight to press up. So I'll press up the overlocked edge and then press up again, slightly wider than my elastic, to make the elastic channel. They have you press it up before you construct it, so that then once it's constructed, it's easier to just sew it with the already pre-pressed line. One thing I will tell you, my fabric in this case was wide enough, because it's a wide back, to actually have doubled over, and I cut both my sleeves at the same time. But something that I often forget to do if I'm on regular width fabric, when you cut your sleeve pieces, you have to mirror them if they're not the same, which these ones aren't. So these are not symmetrical sleeves. You've got to cut one way, and then you've got to flip it over and cut one the other way, because they kind of look symmetrical, but they're not. And at least twice I've forgotten to do that with this pattern, and then it's fixable, but you have to make your sleeve shorter so you can recut the shape of that sleeve head, and it's frustrating. So just a tip, remember with your brains to flip your sleeve pieces over and cut one with the pattern up and one with the pattern, like the pattern piece facing up, and one with the pattern piece facing down. Yeah, all right, next steps are, now this dress has, kind of unusually, darts in the back bodice. There's no darts in the front bodice because it's literally just this, that's your whole front bodice. But in the back bodice, there's darts that come just from the neck here. So I need to put in my darts, which I've marked. And then I need to make my ties. I cut 4 ties. I cut 4 ties, but I only need 2. There is a drop neck version of this dress. I made it, this one here. See, this one only has 1 set of ties. This one has 2 sets of ties. It's got a lower neck with a second set of ties in the middle. I'm only doing the 1 drop, so it's got the bodice comes here and is sealed, and then there's a tie here, and then the drop neck has 1, and there's another set of ties here. Anyway, point of that story was I accidentally cut 4 ties when I only needed 2, but I'm going to come back and show you how I neatly finished the ends of my ties. I did make a video about that during Vlogmas day 2, I think, an early one, but I'll show you again so you don't have to go running around on a wild goose chase looking for videos. Right, so I'm going to press up my sleeves, put in my darts, and then come back and show you how I do my ties. Okay, back soon. I'm afraid I don't really have any weird and wonderful tips for sewing darts, but I will say just a couple things. I'm not sure if you can see that little blue dot there. That is the point of my dart, and I do like to start at the outside edge of the dart, sew towards the dot, but to make sure that I am actually sewing in a nice straight line, I line my dot up with the red line on my diagonal seam tape, which I've shown before in like quilting videos. It's very helpful for a 1/4 inch seam, but also this red line is where the needle is. So if you line the point you're headed up with, or if you line the point where you're headed up with the line of the seam tape, then you can go there straight. And then at the end, I sort of go to that point, like right to the very edge of the fabric, and then I pull it out a little bit to leave some threads, and I do tie a knot at the end there. Rather than backstitching, I tie a knot. So yep, that's everything I know about darts. It's not very much, but it works fine. I do have one other tip for you, not dart specific, but I will show you on this dart because that's what I'm working on. Okay, so if you can see here, a little blue mark, I've used a water erasable pen to do my markings. And because I'm paranoid that they won't come off, I definitely don't want to iron it before I've removed them. And the way that I remove them is with this watercolor pen. So it is a pen that you can fill up with water and then use the brush tip to wash away small markings. Without having to like wet everything. So that is pretty much gone. See if I can show you another one. Here's another one here. We'll try this one. This is the last one at the moment. So I'm just squeezing the water out of the brush and then brushing it onto the mark. And now that mark has gone. Okay, I have my back bodice pieces with my darts in place. I have pressed up the bottom edges of my sleeves to fit my elastic in, and I will just tell you that I have also marked the front of each sleeve because it is almost impossible to tell which is the front side and which is the back side. And I don't like to use marking pens for stuff like that unless it's in the seam allowance, because I'm always paranoid that they're not going to come out. So it's just a piece of paper and a pin, and I've got that on both sleeves. And now the other thing I'm going to show you is how I finish my ties. So in the pattern it tells you to sew them right sides together and then turn through the loop, right, to make a long strap. But I despise that method. It 99% of the time ends in tears, and I've tried all the tricks and all of the tips and all of the tools, and I can't bear it. It just makes me want to throw something out a window. So in most cases, I'm just going to press them to the center and then press them to the center again, and then fold them in half like that. And then I'll top stitch around all the outside and be done with it. That's how I've done the straps for all of my Vali dresses, and they all work fine. So I'm going to show you how I neatly finish the end of a strap when I do it this way. And if you end up watching all of my sewing videos, you're going to see me use the same tips and techniques over and over again. But let's presume that you haven't watched any of the other ones and this is your first time. And so I'll show you this again, even though I have shown it before. Okay, so here I have my long strip. It's got 4 press lines in it, hopefully that you can see. And I'm going to fold in the left pressing line. Then I'm going to fold down the top by about 1/2 inch. And that gives us a nice, neat fold across the top there. Then I'm going to fold in the second pressing line. Like so. And then that makes a little pocket in here. And I'm going to tuck the other side into that pocket. Like that. You might need to get tweezers or the pointy end of a pair of snips or something like that, just to tuck that in there. And then once you've got that bit in, you can rearrange all the rest of your pressing because that remembers where it wants to be. And then you can just top stitch all the way around. But the end is beautifully neat and tidy. Okay, so the next step is to assemble the bodice at the shoulder seams. So there's 2 front pieces, 1 back piece, and I'm going to attach them together at the shoulder seams. And normally you would do the same thing for the facing and then sew them together around the neck edge and down the front just with the facing. But because I am fully lining, I have another set of front and back. I'll join them together as well, and then they will be, that will be as if it were a facing, but it's a full lining. So I will do that next. And my ties are here and finished. They're all neat and tidy. And so once I assemble both of the bodice pieces, I will attach the ties to the front here. And then once those pieces are all together, I'll sew them, bear with, right sides together, up this side, around the neck, and down this side, sandwiching the ties in between. And the seam allowance around the neck is, I think, 3/8 of an inch, I think. So I will make sure that my ties are 3/8 of an inch away from the top and that they're perfectly lined up and even, so that when I sew this together, I won't catch the ties in the stitching at the top, but they'll be stitched down in the front. That makes sense. You know what I'm saying. Keep the ties out of the way of the neckline stitching, but they'll be held in place by the front stitching. Okay, I've sewn the bodice pieces together at the shoulders and I have basted these ties in place. And now I will take this back to the machine and I'll sew up the side around the neck and back down. And then I think after that I'll have to understitch the facing side. So I'll come back and talk to you about that when it happens. Okay, so this is essentially what the bodice looks like. I'm not sure if it's laying flat in the back actually, but if it is, hopefully you'll be able to see. And so this part here comes together at a V, and then the skirt part attaches to that, and then your ties are here, which you can tie or not. Okay. Now the seam allowance around this neck edge is actually only 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters, not 3/8 of an inch, which is fine. But I will say that some of my stay stitching around the neckline did sort of peek out a little bit. I'd gone a bit wide on that. So I did have to go through and unpick a few visible stay stitching stitches on the outside. But I think that's fine because now it's all stitched together, so it shouldn't stretch out anymore. And then the next job is to open it all out, and I'm going to clip into these seam allowances, press them all towards the facing, and then from the top side stitch very close to the seam line on the facing side to understitch those seam allowances. Because of the way it's constructed with the ties in the front of the bodice there, the ties are here. When you are understitching, you have to sort of go as far as you can to the ties and then go around the, like, take it out from under the needle, go around the corner, and then go as close as you can to the ties and stitch the rest. You can't understitch over the bit where the tie is because it's in the way, and it would get like stitched down. So you have to sort of go as far as you can and then stop and then go around. And then that's what it looks like there. You can see, if you can, there's a few little threads here that I need to go back and pick out. Okay, so now I'm going to press and understitch, and I'll come back when I'm done. Friends, I do not like understitching. I don't like it at all. It is probably one of my least favorite sewing tasks, but I'm doing it and I'm going to show you how I do it. So I don't know how well you can see from there, but the seam line is here. It's coming straight down here, and I'm coming up on the bit where the tie is. So I want to show you why you can't go all the way through there. So the seam line is here. This side is the bodice outer. This side is the bodice lining. And as I'm sewing, I'm trying to keep the seam line lined up against the inside of the left leg of my foot here. So there's a gap in between the teeth of your foot. I'm trying to keep the seam line lined up with that so that the needle is just very close to it but won't cross it. And the seam allowance is pressed towards the lining side underneath here. So I'm very carefully going along this line, lining up the stitches of the seam line with the side of the foot here. And now I'm coming up on this tie, and you've got to spread it out as you go, right? To make sure that it's nice and flat and your seam allowances are over here. But once you get to this tie in the corner, you can't spread it out any further. So I'm going to go as far as I can to keep it spread out flat, which will be about here. And then I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to move it underneath from underneath the needle, and then I'm going to come around to the other side of the corner and start again over here. So I'll miss probably 2 inches before and 2 inches after where the tie is. Yeah, just in case you're wondering how that works or how to do it. That is how I'm going to do it. Okay, so I've come up to about here, and then I've stopped. I apologize for my squeaky chair, it's squeaky. So I've stitched up to here and then I've stopped, and now I'm going to put this back under the needle to the point where I can lay it flat. Make sure that the seam allowances are pushed to the right side, which they are. So that's about as far back as I can go to keep the fabric nice and flat. So then I'm going to put the foot down with the seam line lined up on the inside edge of this foot, and then I'll start again. And I'll just then stitch all the way down to the end of that, and then that job will be done. Then I'll give it a very good press and we'll move on. Okay, that actually does look pretty good. You can see here, hopefully, this line of understitching on the inside, very close to the edge. Yeah, looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And now I need to decide which label I'm going to put on it. Now this is for my daughter, as you know. So I think I might use this one. I need to put the label on now before I close up the side seams and stuff, because otherwise I won't be able to get it in there. So I think that might be the label that I use for this. I guess I'll have to get a yellow thread and go around the outside. So I will do that. And then I also have these little Mama made, what are they, like seam labels? And I'm wondering if I could stick that in the pocket. Like when I attach the pocket, I'll put it in there, and then just the little Mama made bit will like stick out the front of the pocket opening. I'm not sure. I haven't tried that before. I don't know if it would stick out and like actually look terrible, because it's, you know, it's going to be like a party dress. I don't want it to be silly. But I might try it and see. Maybe I'll like pin it in there and see what I think. Yeah, anyway, so that is the bodice essentially. Well, the yoke anyway. It's not really the bodice because the sleeves and the skirt make up the rest of the bodice, but that's the yoke. All right, so next job is to gather up the skirt pieces, and you have to attach the front skirt to the bodice here. And then there'll be like a section left over on each side, and you attach the back skirt to the back bodice, and there'll be a section, and then you sort of have to do like a mitered corner. A mitered corner? Is that what it's called? What do we call it in quilting? A partial seam. We have to sort of do partial seams. So we're gonna like, yeah, this is the tricky part to get this right. But I'll come back and I'll show you that when I do it. Probably tomorrow at this stage, but we'll see how we go. Okay, I hope any of that made sense. I'm getting tired now. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, just one quick tip while I'm sewing this label on. So I have put it where I need to put it with just a little bit of a glue stick, it's an English paper piece and glue stick, but you can use any glue stick that will wash out, like any washable glue stick. And so I've put in a yellow thread so that I can stitch it on without it standing out too much. But if you've ever tried to sew a label on, one, you need to get very close to the edge, and two, you want to be able to finish your stitches close enough to the edge but without going over, right? So I just wanted to show you what I do. Let me pop you off the tripod for a second, and then I'll pop you back on. Okay, so here's a close-up of what I mean when I say I line up whatever I'm trying to sew up against the inside of the foot. So you can see here there is a gap in between. Oh, where's my? There we go. There's a gap in between the two sort of teeth of the foot, legs of the foot, whatever these are. Toes? I guess they're toes. There's a gap in between there. I'm using a walking foot at the moment. I like to use it for quilting, and I just tend to keep it on unless I need to take it off for any reason. Anyway, so I'm trying to make my stitches very, very close to this edge of the label. So I've got the edge of the label lined up with the inside of the foot here. And then that means that the needle's going to be very close. And then when I get to the end of here, I want to make sure that I'm on the very edge of the label again when I turn around the corner, because I don't want to stitch over these white bits, and I don't want bits of the label like flipping up. So I will pop you back on the tripod and show you how I do that. Okay, so I'll just go and get as close to the end as I can. And I normally keep my stitches at about 2 millimeters, but when I'm sewing on my label, I've got them a slightly smaller again. And when I get close to the edge, if I think I'm not going to make another full stitch without going off, I will actually just make my stitch length very small and stitch as many stitches as I need to get right up to that edge. So now I've got right to the very corner, and when I turn it around and straighten it up, I'm right on the edge to come traveling back down this way. So if yeah, just on this dial here. So normally I stitch, normally I stitch at about 2, slightly over 2 maybe when I'm stitching regular seams. When I'm putting my label on, I go about 1.5, and when I get to the end, if I need to make it really small, I'll go all the way down as far as I need to just move that needle a tiny, tiny bit until I get to the end when I can turn without going off the edge. And there we go. Now, you can't really even see the stitching at all in this case because the color is a pretty good match, but yeah. So the stitches, hopefully you can tell, are right up against the edge, and yeah, they go all the way up to the corners and then straight down the sides. So just a little tip for you. Good morning, my dears. Actually, I think it's afternoon now. I had to clear off my table to cut some orders and go to the post office and wait in the big long line and do some grocery shopping. And, you know, working from home is all very good and well until you actually have to, like, do life as well. And then suddenly it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you haven't actually done the thing you were supposed to be doing today. Anyway, after I left you last night, I showed you sewing on the label. I did do a little bit more work, but I didn't film it. So I'll show you what I got up to. There is the label in there, all beautiful and neat and tidy. And because I have lined the bodice, this now will be treated as one piece. So in order to make sure everything stays where it is, I have just basted the sides together of the 2 layers. So this is just as if it would be if it was the original faced version. I'm just going to show you why I fully line it. So in the pattern, it has a facing, which you see here in the back neck, which is fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with the back neck facing, but in the front, if you have this tied up, it's probably fine, but I never leave the top bit tied up. I always have it open. And you can see here, the facing only goes that far, but it opens up a bit further than that. So you can see in the neckline, the facing there. And I just think that looks a bit messy. I don't think it's as nice. You could probably make the facings wider to accommodate that, or like, you know, make the facings go in a bit deeper so that as it folds out, you don't see the stitching. But I think if you're going to faff around doing all of that, it's just as easy to line the whole thing. This is the one I made that has the lower drop neck version, and the facing does go all the way down into the drop neck, and the drop neck goes below the bodice. So I wasn't sure how to fully line that whole section without also having to fully line the skirt. So that's why I did do the facing for this version, but I don't enjoy it. Okay, so that is the bodice and the facing. I also have overlocked all of my pockets. I always use this pocket piece and I always like to overlock them before I insert them because it's easier to overlock them before they're attached, and then like trying to go around all these corners, I don't love it. And once you sew them together, yes, they're overlocked separately, but I don't mind that. That's okay with me. And I also gathered up my skirt pieces and my sleeves. So while I was attaching that label, I had a bright yellow thread in the machine. So then I always like to do my gathering in a contrasting color so that when I'm trying to pull out my gathering stitches, they're really easy to see. So I normally just use whatever brightly colored or contrasting colored thread I have laying around, and I use my old half empty bobbins as well for doing the bottom side of the gathering. So I've got yellow on the front, bright pink on the back. I've gathered up both of my skirt pieces between the notches and both of my sleeves between the notches. And in the pattern, it tells you, I think, to gather up these pieces to a measurement and then fit them to what you're supposed to attach them to. So it will say gather the skirt to, I don't know, 21 centimeters, or I think one of them is like, you know, some amount of inches and a 1/16 of an inch or something. That's too precise for me, I think. So I am going to just pin them together and then gather them up to fit into the space where they go, rather than gathering them and tying them off beforehand. So again, I have shown my gathering technique in the Hope dress video, but if this is the first one that you're watching, I will show it again when I get to it. I think that's all I got up to last night. So my next step now is to, I also overlocked the skirt. Oh, bang, sorry. I also overlocked the skirt hem. So the way I like to hem the Vali is to overlock the bottom. It's very curved. The hem is, so it's a very curved hem. It's wide and it's curved. And at the sides, it sort of comes together at a point, which hemming once that's together, I'm sure there's a very clever way to do it. I've not learned it. I don't know how to make it neat to go up to that point and hem both of them together. So what I like to do is actually hem the skirt before I sew the side seams. So I hem the front skirt, I hem the back skirt, and then I sew them together. What I also like to do in this instance, because of that, and I'll show you on this one. So this is the side of the skirt. See how it comes up to a point and then goes back down? So this is the front, this is the back. So what I like to do is attach the pockets to the side skirts, overlock the side of each skirt piece with the pockets attached. Then I hem the front and back skirts individually. And then once they're hemmed and they're overlocked individually, then I sew the side seam together, and then I press those overlocked seam allowances open. So then from the outside, it looks very neat. And on the inside, both of the skirts are hemmed. I think I actually did a pin hem on this one, but I've overlocked the one I'm making today. So both of the skirts are hemmed separately. Both of the side seams are overlocked separately, and then I sew them together and press those seams open. And that to me is just the easiest way to do it, rather than trying to hem around a point. And then once you overlock it, like if you overlock them together and fold them in one direction, it can also make it a little bit bulky. So that's what I like to do. Okay, so next step, I'm going to add the pockets to the side seams. I'm going to overlock the side seams. Then I'm going to hem the skirts. That is what I will do next. And then I will show you how I attach the skirts to the bodice. Okay, so I have hemmed the bottom skirt, and by that I have just folded up the overlocking and then folded up again and then stitched very close to the fold. I have attached my pockets and overlocked the side seams all the way down. And I also put in one of the pockets so that when it's folded back like that, this will be the side of the dress, and there is a little label there that says Mama Made. Perhaps a bit of a risk putting that in there, but hopefully my daughter won't mind. I don't think she will. I think she'll like it. It's not very sticky outy. I think it will be okay. Okay, so the next step is to attach the front skirt to the front bodice. And what you have to do, okay, so this is the front bodice. We're going to place the bodice right sides together along the skirt. I'm not sure if you can see right here, I have a mark that is the center of the bodice, or the skirt rather. And then the idea is to match up both sides of the front bodice perfectly in the center of the skirt. So I'll just pin those in there. Okay, I think that's all right. And then here we have a straight bit on the skirt that makes up part of the underarm. And then we have a gathered bit of the skirt that will go into this bodice. So I need to gather up this part of the skirt to fit this part of the bodice. And the way I do that, I've used a yellow thread in the top and a bobbin on the bottom. And in this case, I will go the other way so I can pull the bobbin thread. And I have tied together at the end, I've left a length of thread at the start and the end of my gathering stitches. I've done 2 rows of gathering stitches, and I've tied together the yellow threads with a square knot or a reef knot, you know, right over left and under, left over right and under, whatever that is. And this is the center here where the pins are. So what I'm going to do is pull these pink threads and gather up my fabric until it is the right size to fit in this bodice section. And then when that's done, I'll show you how I ended off. Okay, so I have started at the outside edge of each skirt side and gathered towards the center. And I've tried to make sure my gathers are all nice and evenly distributed. And then when I get to the end, and I've got these pink threads left over, I don't want them to be able to like pull out and come unraveled or, you know, release the gathers that I've just put in there. So to keep them anchored, I wrap them in a figure 8 around the end pin. I just do that a few times. So then those are locked in there. They're not going to come out until I'm actually ready to remove them when I'm sewing over them. Well, not sewing over, I don't sew over the threads. I remove them and actively don't sew over them, but they will stay there until I'm ready for them to be released. Right, so they're wrapped around the pin. When I go to the machine, I'll pull this pin out, I'll separate those threads so that I don't sew over them, and then I'll sew down here. Hopefully, if the seam allowances are all correct, I'll sew approximately in between these 2 rows of gathers. And then when I get to the end, I'll pull this pin out, separate the threads so that I can sew between them and not over them, and that will just make it so much easier at the end to pull them out. Okay, so I've gathered it up and I've sewn it together, and now this is what it looks like. That is where the front skirt meets the bodice. And you can see maybe here I still have my gathering stitches, 1 row above the seam and 1 row below, which I would just say, if you're using a fabric that, you know, like a delicate fabric or a fabric that will get pinholes in it and then you won't be able to get them out, don't use this technique for gathering. You need to keep all of your gathers within the seam allowance if that's the case, but I think this fabric will be fine. So now I need to remove my gathers, and the way that I do that is, so the pink threads were the ones that were wrapped around the pin when I was sewing, and then I removed them from the pin and I tried not to sew over them, but I may have sewed over some of my gathering stitches at some point along the way. So this may not always work, but ideally I'll be able to just pull on these pink stitches as if I were gathering, and those threads will come straight out, which that one has. And now I'll pull the second one. And that's come straight out again. And then because we've pulled out the pink threads, the yellow threads on the inside should also come out very easily, but I did tie those together. So I may have to snap it to actually get it out because it's going to be in one big loop. But then when I pull it out, all of the yellow thread comes out in one piece as well. So then all of my gathering stitches have been removed and everything looks neat and tidy. Okay, I think the last thing I showed you was the yellow threads coming out, which you couldn't really see because I wasn't in the camera. And then I realized I showed you a bunch of other stuff that you also couldn't see because I wasn't in the camera. So what I was showing you about the bodice is that this is now what, I'm doing it again. This is now what it looks like. This is where the front bodice joins the front skirt, and it's in a nice V there. And the instructions will tell you to press the seam allowances from sewing this to the bodice up. But obviously, if you do that, you're going to be able to see the seam allowances sticking up from this perfect V. So I don't know why it says to do that. You'll need to obviously press your seam allowances towards the skirt, not towards the bodice. But so pretty happy with how that turned out. Again, I'm out of the shot, pretty happy with how that turned out. And then I went and I did the same to the back. So this is the back bodice now attached to the back skirt. And I still need to pull out my gathering stitches. Do you want to see that again? Just going to pull both of these pink ones out at the same time. Bit rebellious. Let's see if it works. Oh, totally worked. And pull the yellow thread out. There's nothing holding it in there now except for the knots that I tied when I tied it together. So if I just snip that out of the loop, all of that thread has come out in one piece as well. So that has worked beautifully. Right, so what we have now, almost like an H shape. So here's the front skirt, and then there's a big long bit. This is the bit that goes over the shoulder and creates the bodice, and then this back here is the back skirt. So there's a big rectangle here where the sleeve fits in. Now the top of the sleeve is almost straight. It's got like a big straight bit across the top and then like two sort of slightly angular bits at the ends. And so the way it works is the straight bit goes in through here, and then you sew it up to this corner, and then you have to sort of take it out from under the needle, turn it around, and sew the other bit down here. So it's like a partial seam. If you're a quilter, it is as if you were doing like a Lemoyne star or something like that, where you've got to sew part of your seam and then turn around and sew the other part later. Yeah, so the tricky part, and unfortunately, despite being very careful, my stitches haven't quite gone exactly to that dot. So I'm going to need to remember, because the idea is you put the dot there so that you know where to stop with the next step. But if the first stitches don't go all the way to the dot, then you're kind of missing the point. So I'll have to sort of wrangle that as I go with, as I'm doing it under the machine. So the next step then, hopefully you can see, is I'll take the sleeve piece and gather up the sleeves to fit into this part. And then this part and this part, they won't be gathered, they'll just be straight. But you gather it all in and pin it all together, and you start here and you go to the point, and then you sort of have to like pivot and flip everything around, and then go across here and go to the point, and then pivot and flip, and then come down the other side. And that's the tricky part. The only tricky part is just meeting these corners to make sure that the stitches you're putting in now to attach the sleeves perfectly meet up with the stitches you put in before to attach the bodice to the skirt, so that you don't get any like bumps or puckers or pulls or anything just right in that intersection. That's the only tricky part. And then once the sleeves are in, I think it's just going to be a matter of sewing up the side seams and putting in the elastic. We're nearly done. Okay, so as you probably know, when I am doing anything, I'm figuring it out as I go. Even if I've done it before, I'm always trying to find easier ways or more effective ways to do things. Or maybe, you know, it's been over a year since I made this dress. Maybe I just can't remember how I did it last time. But what I have done now is, this is the over the shoulder bit, and this is the sleeve bit that I've gathered in and pinned that together. And then over this side is the bit that will go and make the like front sort of underarm section, and then on the other side is the bit that will make the back underarm section. So I had said before that I would start here, go to the point, pivot and carry on, but I think what I'm going to do is sew this sleeve shoulder bodice part first, and I'm going to do it so that the gathering is on the bottom. Normally I would like to stitch so that the gathering is on the top, but in this case, fingers crossed, I'm going to do it so that the gathering's on the bottom. So then when I come to this end over here, I can actually see, where am I? I can actually see the point where I stopped stitching this seam. Because if I do it from this side, I can't see that point because it's underneath the other layer of fabric. So if I stitch from this side, I can see exactly where I stopped, and I can take this row of stitching right up to that point. So that is what I'm going to do. And then once I've sewn this part together, then I'm going to come back and I'll sort this side out and start sewing again from that point down to the bottom. I think that will be the safest way to go. Okay, I'll let you know how it goes. Okay, that part is done on one side. I'm afraid to you this might just look like a huge sea of fabric, but I'll try and show you what I've done. So this part here is the sleeve attached to the bodice. Here's the neckline here. This is the shoulder seam, there's the bodice. And I've gathered the sleeve in and attached it. I still need to take out my gathering stitches. And then this part here is what will create the underarm of the sleeve. So what I've had to do is try and match up the part where I sewed this side to this side and the part where I sewed this side to this side and meet at a point in the middle, which I think I've done a pretty good job there. So now I need to sew this part to this part to this part. But as you can see, that's kind of on a diagonal. So there's 3 seams coming together into a point there. So what I now have to do is flip these over, find the place where I stopped stitching this seam, which is hopefully the exact same place where I stopped stitching this seam, put them together, and then stitch this seam. And then we'll have all 3 points, or all 3 seams coming together at the same point, and we will have constructed the sleeve. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my gathering stitches on this side and try and do those underarm seams, and then I'll redo the whole process for the other sleeve, and that's when I'll come back and show you how I am. I have about an hour more that I can work on this before I have to leave. I don't think I'll get it finished in an hour, but I might get the other sleeve on. So I probably will not see you again until tomorrow morning, when hopefully I will have made some more progress. I know I just told you I would not be back tonight, but I have lied to you again. I miscalculated the time before and I actually have to leave in about 20 minutes, but I did finish one side of the sleeve and I wanted to show you. So this is what it looks like. Here is the sleeve, one of them. And from the front, this here is the point where all 3 of these seams come together, and I'm just going to show you. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So that there is the 3 points coming together, and I'll show you the one on the back because I think the one on the back actually turned out a bit better. If you can see, it's right here. There's 3 seams coming together at that point, and that looks nice and neat. So then this is how it will look. Obviously these sleeves are huge, but they get gathered up into an elastic cuff. There we go. So now I just need to attach the other sleeve, overlock all those seams. That's a bit tricky because they're all intersecting and I'm always scared I'm going to put a hole in everything. Yeah, so put on the other one, overlock the seams, and then I think all that's left is elastic and side seams. So yeah, there's probably another hour or so left in this, but I'll have to get to that tomorrow because now I have to go out for the evening. And yeah, tomorrow the air conditioner man is coming at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I have to also tidy up in this room so he can get to the air conditioner because it's behind the long arm machine, which can't go anywhere else. So that's going to be interesting. All right. Anyway, you don't need to know about that. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Hello. It is now Wednesday afternoon. If you have been invested in the saga of my air conditioner, I'm very happy to tell you it has now been fixed. It is icy cold in here, which is fantastic because it's set to be about 36 degrees again tomorrow. But I'm here to show you my progress. The hardest part, I think, or the scariest part anyway of this whole ordeal is overlocking all of these interconnecting seams here, but I think I've done it. I think it's going to be okay. I think everything is neat and tidy enough. And now all that is left to do is sew the underarm seam down the side seam around the pocket and to the bottom. I've already hemmed it, so I don't have to do that. And then after that, the last step will be to fold up the sleeve elastic channel and pop the elastic in, and then it's finished. Which is also lucky because my daughter's coming by after work today to pick it up. So I'm cutting it a little bit close, but that's what I do. You may have just heard my husband coughing in the other room. All right, so I'm going to go sew up these last seams, put in the elastic, and then I'm going to put the dress on and show you what it looks like. I did just want to mention, because I don't think I mentioned it before, when I substitute in my own pocket piece, I like to position the top of the pocket about 8 inches down from the top of the skirt piece. Just one more quick tip that I think I might have shown before, but not in this video. So this is my sleeve hem that I'm double folding. I've just overlocked it, folded it up and folded it up again to make my elastic casing. And I'm going to start here and sew all the way around. And the tip is that I always put a double pin at the point where I need to stop, so that as I'm going around this big tube and I get to the end, I know that's where I have to stop and I don't accidentally just sew all the way through and then have to come back and unpick. Just an easy way to keep track of stuff like that. Are you ready? It's pretty good, right? I'm filming this up and down this time on purpose because I think that makes it easier for you to see like the whole dress. The sleeves are nice and poofy, got elastic in them. You can also, like, if you want to, you can push the elastic up higher to make the sleeves like poofier up here, or you can just have them long. I like to lengthen the sleeves in mine, but I always forget to. I think I lengthened the first one and then every other time I forgot to do it. But my daughter said she was happy with the original length of the sleeve, so I've done that. Now we are not actually the same size, my daughter and I. Not exactly the same size, but she tried on the one that I had made in this size and she was happy with the fit of it. So I just went ahead and did that. And because it's so like big and floaty, right, the only place it really needs to fit is across here. If it's too tight across here, you're in trouble. But other than that, it's going to be big and floaty anyway. So yeah, I think it looks fantastic. I love this fabric. It is not as drapey as my linen versions. It definitely has a bit more structure, but I think in a dress like this, that works. Like, I don't know, I like it. I think if I didn't already have 3 of these dresses, I would be tempted to make myself another one, and I may be tempted to anyway. I have put some of the blue version of this fabric aside for myself. I don't know what I'm going to make with it yet, so please tell me if you have an idea of what you think I should make, or should I just make another one of these? Yeah. So I think I have told you everything I need to tell you about this dress. This fabric is in my shop. It's a Quilting Wideback. It will be linked below. Most of it, I got a bolt of it and most of it sold before I even made this video. So then I ordered another bolt of it. So by the time this video goes live, I think that should be in the shop. So there should be some, hopefully there will still be some left. And if you want to make this dress, probably most dresses, I think you'd be able to get away with 1.5 meters. Anything particularly voluminous or fabric hungry, you might need 2 meters. Yeah, very happy with how this went. Okay, that is all I have for you today. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them if you need any clarification about anything. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are happy and well. And hey, if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe so you can come back and see something else. Okay, I love you. Bye.